The Belonger, a novel, written by Kathleen Mehuron, and narrated by Kathleen Hewitt. Chapter 7. Poker night started at the Sand Dollar the very next week. For 3 months, a regular group of idiosyncratic characters showed up and bonded with Anthony and Holly over a spirited game of cards. Nothing had ever given her greater pleasure than did lording a good hand over Anthony Bascombe. By the third event, she found she was growing bolder in her play. "All in, Lord Bascombe," she said, as she pushed her chips toward the center of the table. With a cocky expression on her face, she laid down her hand. A 6 high straight. Exasperated, Anthony threw his cards down, but his banter never faltered. "Wasn't it the great Dutch Boyd who said, 'Poker is a lot like sex. Everyone thinks they are the best, but most don't have a clue what they are doing?'" Holly put a smirk on her face by way of reply. "And wasn't it the great Paul Newman, in the iconic film The Color of Money, who said, 'Money won is twice as sweet as money earned'?" He shrugged. "Touché." He appeared only slightly upset by her victory. "I concede your point." He gave her a salute. "Well made." "Gentlemen, will you please excuse me?" Holly asked as she stood. "I will call it bedtime now. See you next week." She took several steps away from the table, then stopped and spun around with her long red skirt in one hand. "Oh, and Anthony, keep it down out here. That voice of yours carries a country mile." Montez's cousin Howard opened the gate for her as she headed out. "Good night, miss." "Good night, Howard." A light had been left on in the office. Holly went in and turned it off, and then, instead of leaving the room, sank down into her chair and sipped the bottle of water she'd left on the desktop. The darkness and the quiet helped her wind down. She wasn't quite ready for bed. She could see a couple strolling down the street, hand in hand. There was a security floodlight attached to the roof of the Sand Dollar, but it merely illuminated their outlines. They stood before the gate, and Holly couldn't help but wonder if she knew them. It was already so late. The man turned the woman to him slowly. So excruciatingly slowly. He bent down to kiss her. Though his face was in shadow, Holly knew it was Montez. Her heart stopped. She remembered his kiss well. Nothing else had ever compared. Holly collapsed into her cream-colored armchair, then got up and closed the blind. Chapter 8. It was late May and high season was over. Holly had just returned from a short trip to Vermont, where she'd had to attend to some paperwork. She'd used the opportunity to spend time with her old employers, whom she'd known since she was a girl. They had become like second parents. She'd stayed on a few days to catch up with them. It was revealing, to say the least, to hear herself tell them, "Things are great. I can't imagine living anywhere else now. Working with Byron is mostly a joy. He's still my kid, we butt heads sometimes. But we're having a lot of fun. We put in long hours, but most of the time it doesn't seem like work." "Is it hard being around Montez all the time?" Sally asked. "It's better for Byron." "That's not what I asked you. How is it for you?" They were sitting at Sally's kitchen table. Holly was suddenly fascinated by her cup of tea. When she didn't respond, Sally said, "Just what I thought." "Okay, it's taking some getting used to, seeing him out and about. But I don't have many regrets about moving. I'd like to see you and Toby more. Byron and I miss your Sunday dinners." "Well, one of these days, Toby and I are going to figure out how to get away from the farm. You know how much he loves to scuba dive. And I've got about 50 books I've been meaning to read. Can you imagine? Just sitting outside and enjoying the sun." The many generations of the Trombley family had lived in Vermont for over 200 years when Holly, then a teenager, met Sally and Toby. Their original farmhouse was one of the most historic buildings in their town of Woodbury. It was initially built to be on the main road outside of town, but over 2 long centuries, the city had grown out to meet it. Though the family still maintained enough acreage on the hillside to graze 100 head of cattle. Across time, the outbuildings were converted to diversify the family's businesses. They had a beautiful facility where they produced high-quality maple syrup. Their open dairy stand and cafe used both their own fresh milk and syrup to make the soft ice cream Vermonters referred to as a creamy. They sold their artisan cheeses in their gift shop, where they also carried other Vermont products and crafts. The cheeses were also sold nationwide. Many of their repeat customers came to them with stories of finding their brand name in some of the finest food shops across the United States. A full-time employee was needed just to handle Trombley's online orders. Every year, the demand was so great around the holidays that they had to hire a second staff member to help. Holly so wished she could get their cheddar cheese on Grand Turk. She'd eaten plenty during her visit. She put the palms of her hands across her stomach. I can see all that cheese right there. I have to work on that little roll. Maybe I can dance it off tonight. Sally and Toby had turned the main floor of the original Trombley farmhouse into a successful restaurant for serious farm-to-table foodies. On the second story, there was a 2-room office and a separate small apartment. They'd renovated the enormous attached barn into a huge, now thriving, saloon. It was the hot spot in town all year long, but in the high seasons of summer and fall foliage, they took it up a notch by featuring live music nightly and an array of local craft beers on tap. To take advantage of the lodging shortage in their area in the early 70s, the Trombleys had also built 1- and 2-bedroom cabins. During Holly's recent visit, they'd let her stay in one. What was once a family farm was now a complete tourist destination. Holly first went to work for Sally and Toby the summer before her freshman year of high school. They still told stories about the Holly they knew back then. Toby always said about her, "That girl never shied away from any job. Don't ask her to do something if you don't expect it to get done. Do you remember when she worked in the gift shop when she was 14? At this point, he always took off with one of his favorite anecdotes. Well, business was slow. She said she needed more hours to make more money, and she asked if I had any other work for her to do. So I told her I was trying to move a big pile of hay bales, if she thought she could carry some of them. I showed her where they were and where I wanted them to go. Then I went on with my day and forgot all about it. I finished my work and had dinner later with my family. Afterward, about 7 or so that night, I went out to the barn to check on things." He put the heel of his hand to his forehead every time he told the story, convulsing with laughter. It was dark out by then. I only had a few light bulbs going back where the hay was, so my eyes had to adjust to the low light. But I could hear something going on. I remember standing there squinting and trying to figure out what was happening. And what did I see? There's little Holly, still in her skirt and blouse from working in the gift shop, swinging the old cast-iron bale hook into the hay. I couldn't believe my eyes. She must have moved close to half the pile by then. By herself, mind you. She was too young for me to even think about letting her use any machinery. He patiently let the image sink in for those listening to his story. Toby was widely known as a great storyteller. Then, and this is the best part. He couldn't continue as he was bent over laughing again. When he eventually pulled himself together, he went on. She looked up at me and said, "What? You didn't think I could do it? That just proves you don't know everything." Without even hesitating, I took out my wallet and handed her a $100 bill. Then I drove her home. She couldn't have weighed 100 pounds, soaking wet at the time. He wiped tears from the corner of his eyes and finished with,
Lord, that girl just slays me."
6 years later, when she was a part-time college student, Holly worked her way up to head waitress in their fancy little restaurant. The Trombleys were accommodating to her class times, and since she wrote the schedule for the restaurant floor, it worked out to be mutually beneficial. Holly's 2-year associate degree, which she had to work at piecemeal, took 3 years to complete. In celebration, Sally had taken her shopping for a dress to wear and insisted on paying for it. In the late spring, the entire extended Trombley family was present to cheer her on at her graduation. As a gift, they presented her with one of their older family cars. She was moved beyond words. When she found her voice again, she used humor to temper the high emotion of the moment, and her thoughts came out rougher than intended. "I appreciate it, Toby, but I've got to make sure you're not pulling a fast one," she said. "Do you expect me to take a pay cut in exchange for this vehicle?" The family members roared at that. An automobile was the answer to her prayers. In a few weeks' time, she began commuting out to Castleton State College to start working toward her bachelor's degree, all thanks to them. Toby had learned how to scuba dive when he was in the service. He had gone down to Grand Turk for a vacation the year before Byron was born, and Montez had been his dive master. Impressed with Montez, Toby had talked him into coming up to work for him during the summer and fall, which was low season on Grand Turk and high season in Vermont. If not for that, Holly sometimes thought. She hoped she could get Toby and Sally to start coming down to visit on a regular basis, and she said so often. "We have our own dive shop, Toby, and between the restaurant and the inn, Sally won't have to lift a finger. She deserves a real vacation." Both Sally and Toby had promised to come down someday soon. "I'm going to hold them to it. If I get those two in the habit of visiting every winter, I really will be living in paradise." Yes, Holly missed the Trombleys, but she didn't miss the harsh Vermont winters or the stress of her old job as a school counselor. But the farm was so darn busy. When would there be a right time? Chapter 9. In her new career on the island, Holly allowed herself 2 nights off, Sundays and Fridays. Sunday was for rest. This was when she loved to hole up on a chaise lounge and read. Friday was the opposite. She made every attempt to pack it with wall-to-wall fun. Just a short distance down the street from the Sand Dollar was another inn called Salinas. They had a lush garden courtyard strung with party lights. For many generations, it had been where the traditional musicians would come to play ripsaw, the regional style of music, so called because an ordinary handsaw figured prominently as an instrument for the public. Some called ripsaw rake and scrape because the musicians raked a metal scraper along the teeth of the saw to make the unique percussive sound that defined the genre. When combined with guitar, keyboards, and drums, the effect was riotous, and nearly everyone broke out dancing once the band got going. All the generations came on Fridays. There was no need to worry if you didn't arrive with a dance partner. Once the floor filled with people, the crowd moved as one. Many belongers regularly attended, of course, but so did the smaller expat crowd, and a few tourists always figured out it was the place to be on a Friday night as well. Over the decades, the musical genre had morphed to embrace popular songs in addition to the traditional tunes. Jamaican reggae was a staple in the Friday night sets, and the band always threw in a surprising and unpredictable array of rock songs for good measure. It was said that the renowned North Caicos musician Lovey Forbes had come up with the name combina to describe a subgenre of ripsaw that had come about in the early 80s, which blended ripsaw with popular foreign music. Holly liked to tell people, "You haven't lived until you've heard a Rolling Stone tune played on a handsaw." When she went to Salinas to hear the band, she danced to the point of exhaustion. She also routinely indulged in one too many drinks. Byron had accepted early on that she slept in on Saturday mornings and was careful to adjust their staff's schedules accordingly. He seemed happy that after all her years of back-breaking work, she was having some fun. On most of those Saturday mornings, Holly awakened with a light heart, humming the music from the night before. Sometimes she hummed it all day long. Because everything on Grand Turk Island was brought in by boat, goods there cost way more than they did in the States. Holly had seized the opportunity to go shopping while she was in Vermont, and she'd brought back as much as she could carry in her 3 nesting suitcases. Most of her purchases were linens for the inn, but she'd gotten 4 new sundresses for herself, too. And, her biggest coup, 2 semi-formal dresses she'd discovered in a consignment shop, perfect for poker night. She'd also gotten pretty new underwear. It's interesting how quickly anything with elastic disintegrates in the Caribbean. It must have something to do with the salt air. It was late afternoon on Friday, May 25th, when Holly stood before her full-length mirror in her brand-new, coral-colored A-line dress. Lace-pink panties and bra, my little secret. I don't know why, but they make me feel confident. She brushed her hair and got ready for her night of dancing. Since business was light across the island, she and Byron had decided to close down on Fridays for a while and let business fall to Salinas. They'd agreed the success of the music of Ripsaw Night was a win for everyone in their community, and that it was important to showcase the local culture. The kitchen of the Sand Dollar had a small walk-in cooler where they stored perishable food. Any day of the week, she could easily carry a plate with her and assemble a meal off the wire mesh shelves, which she often did. Tonight, however, she was in the mood to be catered to, and she found it was good business to frequent other places on island. It encouraged them to come to her place in kind. The smell of Salinas's special pasta sauce floated to Holly on the trade breeze, making her mouth water. She decided she would have dinner there before the music started. She knew better than to ask Byron to join her at the last minute, as he probably had a date. At some point this evening, she would inevitably see him bobbing across the dance floor with a girl in his arms. She cursed herself for not inviting a friend to come with her sooner, as she truly hated to eat alone and doubted she could find anyone to join her now. As part of prepping for the night, she had gone so far as to paint her finger and toenails the same coral color as her dress. She thought it looked great with her gold-toned, gilded sandals and deep tan. Bracing herself for a solitary meal, Holly walked the short distance down the street and slipped into the back garden of the cafe. As she found the mere thought of sitting at a table alone depressing, she decided to take a seat at the bar. She cocked a hip up onto a bar stool and set her small purse in front of her on the counter. Tucked in here against the wall, she felt much less conspicuous than she would have out on the open floor. She caught the bartender's eye immediately and nodded. Before she knew it, a chilled martini arrived before her, and she let out a relaxed sigh. The fluted glass was frosted, the party lights were shining, and music played softly. It was an almost perfect setting until, "Well, hello there, Sheila." Of course Anthony would take the seat right next to hers. Holly turned away for a moment to recover from her surprise at running into him so early in the evening. The bartender knew how she felt about the man, as did most everyone in town, and he gave her a knowing glance. In response, Holly threw her hands up and shook her head. "Sheila, my name's not Sheila." She leaned in and scrutinized Anthony's face. He nodded knowingly, just as self-assured as always. "I lived in Australia for a while," he said cheerfully. "Haven't I mentioned it before, young lady? Some of the lingo rubbed off." Holly snorted. "If you're calling me young, you've got the wrong lady." Anthony chuckled, and it made Holly decide to be polite and make small talk. She liked that it was easy to make him laugh. She took a sip of her drink, savored the juniper scent of gin. "So, I know you lived in New York. And now Australia too. How long ago did you live down under?
During my misspent youth. If you want to talk about feeling old, that was 25 years ago. Time overwhelms me sometimes.
I know exactly what you mean. My child is 23 years old. The other day I was walking down Front Street, and as he turned the corner toward me, I thought, oh, what a handsome young man. He looks familiar. You laugh, but I'm serious. Still laughing, Anthony took his sweating beer, jumped off his stool, and went over to the shack that served as the kitchen. He began to taunt someone inside playfully, and did so speaking Creole. From inside the building, Holly could hear hysterical, if somewhat muffled, laughter in response. Everyone on her side of the patio was listening to the exchange and smiling. He has a gift for languages, I have to hand him that. Anthony wore an exquisitely subtle Hawaiian shirt with a fabric of such quality Holly longed to reach out to feel it between her thumb and forefinger. He was freshly shaven, and as he neared, she caught the scent of his citrusy cologne. He carried with him a plate piled high with shrimp and a small ramekin filled with sauce.
This is a gift from Zeus. He's cooking tonight, and he insists we both have the house special as our entree. Are you all right with that? I swear, this morning, all the way over on Queen's Quay, I could smell the pasta sauce. I took a cruise here just for dinner.
That's why I'm here, too. Holly had her long legs crossed. She looked down at her new sandals. Some of the beads that were sewn into them coordinated perfectly with her dress and nail color. Though it appeared she was wearing ankle bracelets, the straps were really designed as part of the shoe. She thought they were pretty sexy. Anthony's head sagged, theatrically and for effect.
I didn't know which would be worse for you, love. To have me sit down here with you, or to have me leave you feeling ignored.
She gasped and blushed from being caught dead to rights. Discreetly ignoring her discomfort, he continued,
I'm fully aware I can sometimes be rather a dolt.
Holly laughed at his refreshing honesty, although she was still a bit embarrassed that he knew of her misgivings about him. You're fine where you are, Holly said to quell her unease. It's not like we haven't broken bread together before. Anthony beamed at her. She didn't think she deserved the delighted look upon his face at all.
Bartender, he called out, what's the best wine you have hidden away back there? Bring it and 2 glasses.
Shifting his eyes back to Holly, he added,
My treat, dear.
Why, well then, thank you. The bright red patches on her face took many minutes to abate. When their plates were delivered, the sight of linguine piled high with chunks of red snapper and lobster, and the aroma that emanated from them, was a delight to Holly. Anthony leaned over, eyes closed, breathed in the rich scent, and grinned. She reached out and squeezed his arm. The sizzling scent of garlic was almost dizzying. On the side of their large crockery plates were fresh greens topped with grilled vegetables. It was a gorgeous presentation that made Holly suddenly feel like she was starving. Her stomach even growled so loudly that Anthony looked up at her and let out a, "Huh." She covered her tummy with both hands. Byron's usually the one who gets going like this. Anthony nodded.
He's still so young, still filling in. That takes a lot of calories. He's a busy man, too. You must be proud of him.
Holly was always thrilled to hear praise about her son. They both longed to dig into their meal, but it seemed everyone who walked into the cafe stopped by to say hello. Holly felt compelled to stand up every time, shake hands, and exchange pleasantries with each one. On this island, in this community, rudeness was not a thing easily forgotten. But giving every friend the greeting they deserved was time-consuming, especially when Anthony was doing the talking and the friend was a young woman who'd happened by to hug him hello. The longer they chatted with new arrivals, the more apparent it became that the crowd would only get larger as the night wore on. Holly had no idea how to handle the situation.
By now, their server had even taken the initiative of carrying their plates back inside the kitchen to put them in a warmer. Anthony took her arm and whispered in her ear, "There's a table in the side garden. Let's have them bring our meals out there." He swiveled toward the bar. "Bartend, will you please open another bottle for us? We're moving to a quieter location." Once he'd retrieved both of their plates from the kitchen, he led the way for Holly. She followed him down the stone path, both their stemware in hand, through the courtyard, and over to the south side of the property. "It's quite lovely here," Holly noted appreciatively. And she discovered she was having a good time.